Hello and welcome to Comic Book Herald's explanation of the Marvel Comics character and hero, Captain Marvel, as well as answering the big question for moviegoers seeking related comics: what's up with Captain Marvel in 2019? Carol Danvers is the erstwhile Captain Marvel as we know her today. Her history actually extends all the way back to the late 1960s in Marvel Comics, debuting in the original Kree-born Captain Marvel's mag. This is an important point to address when talking about Captain Marvel because it's a moniker that has been used by a variety of characters and individuals throughout Marvel history. If you look at the comicbookherald.com Captain Marvel reading order, for example, you will find large sections that actually do not involve Carol Danvers at all. Now, we'll talk a little bit about how Carol becomes Captain Marvel, but one thing I'll note, again, if you get some confusion in here as to, okay, who's actually Captain Marvel, the development of Carol Danvers occupying that role is actually very recent in comics terms, starting in about 2012. And we should also mention here, of course, Captain Marvel, aka Carol Danvers, is not to be confused with DC's Captain Marvel, now running around town as the big red cheese known as Shazam. If it's already too confusing for you, don't worry. Things get very simple very fast here. But, of course, as we talk about how we got to this place, well, I'd be lying if I said it wasn't a little messy. So, Carol Danvers would go on to become Miss Marvel after her debut as a colonel in the Air Force, kind of working as a liaison to who she didn't realize was a Kree-born alien, Captain Marvel. She'd get her powers, basically, by virtue of her connection to Marvel, sort of absorb some of his Kree warrior blood, and go on to become Miss Marvel, a title that she would hold with a variety of alternate code names like Warbird and Binary mixed in, until, again, the year 2012, when writer Kelly Sue DeConnick, costume designer Jamie McKelvey, and initial series artist Dexter Soy launched a new solo ongoing comic book in which Carol took on the Captain Marvel moniker for herself, at the behest of fellow captain Steve Rogers. One wonders whether he simply wanted more captains in the world. Let's do a quick Miss Marvel Days lightning round, because here's the thing about Carol Danvers. She's been around again since the late 60s. She's been a hero with her own mag since about 1977 on and off. But for the purposes, again, of understanding her as Captain Marvel, you really can start reading the comics when she takes on that title. With that said, here's a Miss Marvel Days lightning round of kind of the essential things you need to know from her time in Marvel Comics history throughout the 1900s. She's been a long-running Avenger, frequent collaboration and ties to the Avengers unit. She shares a history with the Uncanny X-Men as well. She has a big involvement in their space battles with the Brood. This would be during the time in the 1980s, I want to say about 1982 to 85, when writer Chris Claremont was on the Uncanny X-Men title. Claremont actually had a huge hand in Miss Marvel's sort of formation in her early days in the Miss Marvel ongoing series, and he brought the character Carol Danvers over to X-Men, I think, to basically to develop and sort of rehabilitate some things that had been done to her character in other magazines, or in other comic books, I should say. One of the most famous Captain Marvel stories, or Carol Danvers stories from this time, she was viciously attacked by Rogue and left in a coma at the behest of Rogue's mentor at the time, Mystique. Rogue absorbed Carol's powers, and the two share a complicated relationship that has lasted to this day as a result. But that is, I think for X-Men animated series fans, you may know Rogue, and you may even have a memory of this involvement here. That might be all you know about Carol, is basically Rogue's got her powers, and also she's Rogue and super interesting. Carol is also a part of one of the creepiest, worst ideas in Marvel Comics history in an Avengers number 200 plot that we are just not going to talk about. Oh, and also she wore a black thong swimsuit with thigh-high leather boots for decades, and lots of guys love this costume for reasons I probably don't need to extrapolate. So those are the Miss Marvel days in brief. So fans in 2019 are going to want to start with the 2012 series relaunch, because that's effectively the defining run for the character as she stands, and what appears to be the direction of her debut in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. It's somewhat uncommon, actually, for a character to get a defining run, I think, this sort of late in their historic life. But nonetheless, again, that is what happened. You have sort of the Kelly Sue DeConnick years. She's a writer, written such Image Comics series as Pretty Deadly and, pardon my French, Bit Planet. But she really revamped this character, again, alongside that Jamie McKelvey costume design, sort of getting her out of that cheesecake look and putting her in her own iconic red, yellow, and blue costume. In addition to just sort of the visual changes, there's also a huge shift in Carol both taking on the Captain Marvel moniker and upgrading, and also just sort of her presentation of herself and her own ability to sort of battle her own demons and overcome her fears, and really instead focus on aspirational goals of kind of the motto that she adapts, and that will tie into the Marvel Cinematic Universe of higher, further, faster. DeConnick with a variety of artists, including Dexter Soy, David Lopez, once they get to the 2014 series relaunch. She does a really great job of establishing Carol's sort of inner turmoil, her challenges with being, one of the strongest people on Earth, but of course also having relationship issues and complexity and struggles. And what does it mean? There's a storyline called Avengers: The Enemy Within, where what does it mean if you take away Captain Marvel's powers? Who is she then? Who is Carol without that power set, and how does her heroism come through? And then there's kind of this amazing, inspiring development that happened through Captain Marvel readership of this thing called the Carol Corps. And the Carol Corps are basically a gathering of predominantly female fans who really found, inspiration and hope in Carol being this incredibly strong, again, sort of idealistic female hero, but who also is very clearly a real person. There's a lot of humanity in DeConnick's writing that comes through in Carol's struggles. She's far from perfect in how she interacts with others. She can be tough and difficult, but she's also very fun and has a sense of humor. And turns out she loves Star Wars. And there's some really sweet moments as well of Carol just, her basically how she can inspire little girls and kids to grow up to want to, again, fly higher, further, faster. It's a great series. And again, the series starts in 2012. It runs for, I believe, 17 issues, and then it relaunched in 2014 with DeConnick still at the helm writing. And that's the point at which Carol's continuity starts to get a bit messier and a little less clear as to what you should read. Basically, the way I would sum it up is after the DeConnick years, and in the 2014 series, you really get the start of this, Carol becomes sort of an Earth police operative, or kind of the top cop in space. Is really the best way to put it. She kind of joins up with the Guardians of the Galaxy, has some moments with them. She does a lot of sort of interplanetary travel. She begins and refounds the Alpha Flight team of Canadian heroes, and they basically watch over Earth from a space station above the planet. And she also joins up with the Ultimates team, which is one of my favorite Marvel Comics series of the last decade. It's written by Al Ewing with art initially by Kenneth Rockford and later Travel Foreman. And it's Carol's role on this team that is, to me, the best read from this era. Again, you'll see her in big picture Marvel stuff. We'll talk about Civil War II a little. You see her in Secret Empire. She is quite literally trapped outside as, kind of leading the Marvel Space Force, as it were. But Ultimates is the one that really shows Carol's role as this kind of a delegate. She is the one who is keeping peace between Earth and other planets out there. She takes kind of the role of the former leader of SWORD, SWORD, a la SHIELD, Abigail Brand. And she's kind of, again, the new top cop. She's the Nick Fury of space, if you will. But with the Ultimates, this is not something that holds a ton of ground. She's working with a team of heroes like Black Panther and Blue Marvel and Miss America and one or two I'm forgetting, Monica Rambeau, a former Captain Marvel herself, actually. And they're tackling literally the sort of unsolvable problems is the team's ethos. They are there to, the very first thing they try to do is fix Galactus. They say, everyone, we fought him, we've prevented him, how about we solve the problem of Galactus? And then they go out and do that. And it's one of my favorite series for that reason. It's an incredible, incredible Marvel cosmic book. And I think it's the one that really solidifies the idea that Carol is probably best suited, or at least she has been the past few years, as a Marvel Cosmic player. And she's the one who, kind of is the one who sets out to put the team together. And this leads to maybe the lowest moment in recent Captain Marvel history, which is her involvement with the 2016 event Civil War II. Carol sees an opportunity to solve the ultimate problem, which is to see and stop disasters before they ever happen. And basically, Carol takes the side of, yes, using predictive justice in the form of this inhuman Ulysses who can see disasters before they happen. And as you'd imagine, this leads into not only fighting among heroes, but fighting among her Ultimates team. Carol is definitely positioned as the wrong-headed big bad here, honestly. She's the one who is siding with government and locking people up for actions that they haven't even taken yet. It is a clearly unpopular stance, and it is something that does not reflect particularly well on the character, given her, her past and the last several years of her comics, in which she was a substantially more likable character. That said, it does sort of fit the narrative of her, again, as this, as a militaristic sort of tied to government leader. She's in a sort of political position of reporting to delegates on Earth and saying, here's how my facility running, she's basically a general out in space. So there's all these other fixtures that get in there, and obviously it becomes complicated and messy. But that Civil War II, I don't really recommend it to anyone, actually, for any reason. That said, it's clearly, on one hand, it's good because it's Marvel, I think, trying to give Captain Marvel, she's the player opposite Iron Man in this, instead of, in 2007, that was Captain America. And when they did the sequel, it's Captain Marvel. And that's a big transition, and that means something. But unfortunately, the event is very, very bad. I think blaming Carol Danvers' role in it would be wrong, but it's just not a good comic, unfortunately. So that is kind of the past, basically after 2015 through 2018 in a nutshell. It brings us up to where we are in 2019. So there's been a relaunch series. It's written by writer Kelly Thompson, who's been doing some really fun, good work in Marvel over the last 3 years. She wrote an excellent 16-issue Hawkeye Kate Bishop comic that I recommend everybody check out on Marvel Unlimited. She has also been doing a lot of work in the X-Men universe with some really fun Rogue and Gambit work. So she's taken over Captain Marvel. I think it's a great fit. It's only 2 issues in, so there's not a ton to say about it other than, the hook of the title is basically, all right, let's welcome Carol Danvers back to Earth. Let's get her out of space finally, and of course that very quickly is going to run into some complications. Some quick fun facts about Carol Danvers. She's really good friends with both Jessica Drew and Jessica Jones. The Jessica Jones friendship, I think, gets kind of overlooked here in 2019. It was a big part of the early 2000s Alias series written by Brian Michael Bendis with art by Michael Gaydos. But it's actually something that even, Bendis in his final days with Marvel was leveraging their friendship as well. And a final note, Carol Danvers is Kamala Khan's idol, which explains why Kamala adopts the Miss Marvel moniker when she gets her own powers in 2014, maintaining that legacy as well. So there you have it. That is a brief history, essentially, of Captain Marvel. Again, for fans of the MCU or anyone looking to, now that the character is obviously going to reach a lot more people, looking to read more comics of hers, I highly recommend you start with the 2012 run written by Kelly Sue DeConnick. You then proceed and read the 2014 run, and why her series was rebooted so many times in so many years is a question for another day. From there, I would recommend reading Ultimates. There's an Ultimates 1, which is 12 issues, came out in 2000, or started in 2000.